Okay, so this is a church of St. Stefano Rotondo. Rotondo means it's round. And it's one of Janet and my favorite churches because, as you know, I love the early church. That was the first 2 centuries, first century, second century, that made us Catholics, because I couldn't have cared less if they had come up with Catholic things later in the centuries. But if you could show me that there were all the links of the chain went all the way back to the apostles without any chain links missing, then I was toast. I had to become Catholic. And this church shows you that. And I give a talk, probably besides my conversion story and my talk on the Eucharist, the most popular talk I give is called Swimming Upstream, Living a Catholic Life in a Pagan World. And it started out when my mom and dad said to me, my mom lived to 100, my dad to 94. And before they died, I wanted to talk to them a little bit about their life. And they said, Steve, we want to tell you that we really don't like our country anymore. And I said, Dad, you're the most patriotic guy I've ever known. We've never missed a 4th of July parade. You have a big flag in our front yard with a light on it. He says, yeah, Steve, but I don't like what it's becoming. When your mother and I got married and decided to have a family back a while ago, they said there was the worst thing. She said, if someone had come to me and said, do you ever plan to get an abortion? She said, my question would have been, what's an abortion? Mm-hmm. And if you were going to say that the Supreme Court was going to rule that 2 men could get married and call it a marriage, and it's equal to what your father and I did to have a family, she said, there's something wrong with our country, and I don't really like the way our country is anymore. And I came up with a timeline when they said that our country is really becoming pagan again. Mm-hmm. And yet, for 1,700 years, the West has been Christian. Not that they carried a Bible around and quoted John 3:16, but everybody believed there was a God, that abortion was wrong, that LGBT was unthinkable, that all of these things that now have become part of our culture in America it's a pagan influence. It's atheism and paganism and hedonism has brought this all in, an abandonment of God and of Christianity. And I realized that in the early church, we're going to look at here, these people were in a pagan society, a Greco-Roman world that also had abortion and infanticide. There's a letter that says a man wrote to Alexandria, Egypt, working, and he wrote to his wife in Rome, and he says, when I get my wages, I'll send them to you in Rome. And in the meantime, he knew she was pregnant. If you happen to give birth and it's a boy, keep it. But if it's a girl, expose it. And then there's another quote that said in the first centuries, the Romans, that they would dispose of their unwanted babies by throwing them under the bridges of the Tiber River to be consumed by dogs at night. And the Christians went out and collected those babies, and they raised them as their own and got a great respect among the people of Rome, because Christians had a different idea of what the human person was. A human person is made in the image of God, is going to live for eternity, and because of that it has inestimable worth. There's no way you can put worth on a person. They have dignity of being made in the image of God, and they have to be treated with that dignity from the moment of conception until the end of natural death. The early church lived in 300 years of being tortured because they refused to accept. Most of these people you're going to see were tortured because they refused to accept the Roman gods. And they said, no, there is one God. We went past the Pantheon today. We didn't go in, but there's niches, and there's all the gods, Apollo, Zeus. And the Romans said, oh, great, you love Jesus? Well, there's an empty niche. We'll put him in there, and you can worship him with all the others. And they said, no, he is the only God. We have one Lord, and it's Jesus Christ. And that's why they were tortured. Because to be a Roman, you had to accept the civil religion of Rome. It wasn't church and state. The civil religion, to be a Roman in good standing, you had to also worship their gods. And the Christians said, no, that's why they were persecuted. And so they had, in that culture, they had abortion. They had half of the Roman population were slaves that were property. And the Christians came along and said, no, that's not the way it should be. And they had a whole different perspective. And over a 300-year period, 313, Christianity was legalized. And later it became the religion of the empire. How did these simple Christians, Paul says, not many of you were wise, not many of you are rich, not many of you are of noble birth, but how did those simple Christians with sandals and robes, how did they convert the whole Roman Empire to Jesus Christ in 300 years? They turned the whole world upside down for Jesus Christ in 300 years. And then it became the religion of them. How did they do it? So when my mom and dad say they don't like our country anymore because it's gone pagan, I thought, well, it has all been Christian in the West for 1,700 years, and we've had the benefit of universities and hospitals and all of the things that Christianity brought. Look at the music of Bach and Beethoven and the art of Rembrandt, the beautiful churches. All of that is now being thrown away for no good reason other than people do not want God to tell them what to do. And so I thought in my mind, there's 3 steps in this timeline. Pagan Rome, Christians convert. 1,700 years we live in a Christian culture, and now for no good reason in the last 100 years, we're throwing all of that away and going back to a pagan culture. So what did and then the popes and all the synods are coming out with documents about the new evangelization and how it's done. How many of you have read all those documents? That's what I thought. They're not necessary. It's totally unnecessary because we already have the blueprint on how to convert a pagan world. Go back and look at what the early Christians did, and what it was called is martyrdom. They really, really, really believed the gospel enough to even die for it. And the Romans knew their religion was mythical, the gods. And they said, what do those Christians have? They die and they sing to their gods. They help each other. We Romans die very poorly. We scream and curse. And what do they have that we don't have? Justin Martyr. We saw his pillar today, that one that we went past. But anyway, he said that he converted. He was a philosopher. He converted because he watched the Christians die. How can they die like that? How can they do that? What do they have that we don't have? And over a period of time, the whole Roman Empire turned upside down for Jesus Christ because they really believed it enough to even die for it. And then the question comes, if you were standing like these people and you had a choice, you get in this line and you're going to deny Christ and burn incense to Zeus, or you're going to get in this line and I'm going to cut your head off. Which line would you get into today if they closed this door and said every one of you have to make that decision today? You're either going to deny Jesus and burn incense to Zeus right now, or you're going to get your head cut off. Which line would you get in today? And had the early church got into the wrong line, we wouldn't be here today because they were the hinge figures. It's because they were willing to die for their faith that you and I are even here today. And so I just want to take you along and show you some of these. It starts here. What's this picture of? The innocents, they're the martyrs. And if you think about it, they're a different kind of martyrs because other martyrs have died for Jesus Christ. They died in the place of Jesus Christ. They were killed because they thought they were Jesus, and those were innocent deaths. Okay, then you come over here. Mary is pictured as a martyr. The 7 dolors, the 7 sorrows of Mary. I give a talk that I came up with. It's called The 12 Unknown Sorrows of Mary. Mary has gone through a lot more sorrows than you realize. So I have a talk called The 12 Unknown Sorrows of Mary as I go through the scriptures. But it's showing her as a martyr. And then we come over here. Who's the next martyr? Jesus himself. And there he's being martyred. He's our example. He gave his life for us. And he says that you have to lay down your life for him. One of the most audacious, rude things he ever said when he spoke to his disciples who saw crucifixions every day, because anytime you went in and out of Rome or in and out of Jerusalem, you saw men hanging on crosses, completely naked with crows ripping the skin off their flesh, total loss of all your bodily functions in front of your family. And he said, unless you are willing to take up your cross and follow me, you're not worthy of me. That is so audacious. What leader would dare say that to his people? And yet that's what he meant. Unless you're willing to take up your cross and suffer for me like I did for you, and even to become a martyr for me, you're not worthy of me. Catholics that aren't willing to do that should just go become Protestants. Go away. Because the real Catholics, real believers, have to say, yes, I'm willing to die for Jesus if he requires it of me. Then here's Stephen. Look at him throwing rocks at Stephen. My mom made me Stephen. I hope it's not any predilection she had. But you also see in each one, you see you see A, which is Stephen, and then you have B and C, which are others that are being. Here's Peter. Peter being crucified upside down on a cross. And at the Sea of Galilee, he could not say, Jesus, I love you, agape. Jesus said, do you love me? Do you agape me? Unconditional love. Peter says, Lord, phileo, you know I'm your friend. He couldn't say, I love you with agape love, but he proved that he did in the end. Peter had a long life of conversion, and that's okay. All of us have a long life of conversion. But finally he said, okay, Lord, I do agape you, and he gave his life for Jesus. This one, I don't...
There's Thecla in there.
Yeah, Thecla. It's buried alive. There's also up in the top right, bulls. I think Thecla comes along later. But they were the most ingenious of torturing Christians because they couldn't get Christians to deny the Lord. So they tried all these ingenious, maybe if we do this, we'll get them to. And they tried the most terrible pain. This is Ignatius of Antioch. Remember, we were in San Clemente. Seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? San Clemente.
And Stephen Pavia, also Gervasius and Protasius.
Yes.
B and C.
Those are, Gervasius and Protasius were the ones that were buried with Ambrose, which we didn't get to see his tomb. Remember his body because of the archbishop. Anyway, but that's them being killed. And there's Ignatius of Antioch being eaten by the lions in the Colosseum that we saw. And then his bones were wrapped in purple cloth, and they carried his bones on their shoulders like a champion out of the arena. They gathered him up, and they took him back to Syria, to Antioch, and then after that became more Muslim and so on. They brought those bones back in there in St. Clemente, now only 300 yards from where he was eaten by lions. So then we come here. This is
John the Apostle.
John the Apostle, the tradition says he was burned in oil, but it didn't kill him, and they find he survived it, and he was the only of the 12 disciples who died of old age. Around 100 years old, his tomb is in Ephesus, and it's in this Church of St. John, the tomb. And when I wrote my book on John's Gospel, I remember taking the first copy to that Church of St. John and laying it on John's tomb, and I cried. I said, thank you for what you did, because that's how I wrote his book. I loved him more than ever. And I love it when I'm on a radio or something. He says, Steve Ray, author of St. John's Gospel. And I said, don't I wish? I just wrote a book about him. So that's John. Then they cut the bishop's head off, and he's carrying it. Dionysius. Dormitillo. And in the background, you have other forms of torture, locking people in a building and burning it down. By the way, you're really lucky because all of these have been restored. They were hard to see before. And this is the first time I've come when there aren't barriers blocking and where they're working on them. So you're the first ones I brought that have been able to just walk around and see the whole thing. This might be Ignatius here, actually. Being eaten by lions. People up there thrown out of buildings, see. And then we come here. These are maybe saints, martyrs, we don't even know their names and what they did. But look they put them in a pot of boiling oil. See, of that fire, they put them inside of a fire like that. And up there on the top C, they're pushing them off a cliff. Cutting off heads, beating people. You know, they were trying to be so ingenious in the way that they tortured people. Polycarp is one of my favorites. About 165, my son Jesse took his confirmation St. Polycarp, because Polycarp, you could still read the record of his martyrdom. And the governor said to him, Polycarp, you're 86 years old. why don't you just deny Christ and get it over with? Otherwise, I'm going to kill you. He says, 86 years I have served him, and he has done me no ill. How can I abandon my Savior now? And they burned him at the stake, and it said that the flames enveloped him like a cloud, and
Like a sail.
like a sail, and the fire wouldn't burn him. And he just prayed in the middle of the flames. If you watch my movie, Apostolic Fathers, we actually created, I'm burning in a fire, and the fire pulls away from me, and I'm praying the prayer he prayed in the midst of this fire. It's pretty cool technology we used, actually. But finally, and he didn't look like that. He was 86 years old. May I look like that when I'm 86 years old? But they finally, when the flames, they couldn't even get close enough because the flames were so hot, but it didn't burn him. When the flames went down, they went in and stabbed him, and a dove flew out of his side, and they collected his bones also and brought his bones with royal treatment. And when we were filming the story of the Apostolic Fathers, we were in Izmir, Smyrna of then, and Izmir today, where he was killed. And I talked to the Archbishop, and I said, I'm making a movie. He says, come here, I want to show you. We still have his bones. And I got this right there in the movie. You see his part of his skull. Look what they did to women. Women were special treatment because you can torture women in a special way, I guess, ripping off the breasts. And this is, there's a woman called Blandina, who's the next one. Oh, by the way, look at the man in the white cape and the beard. What's he holding in his hands? He's holding a statue of Zeus or one of the gods. And he's saying, all you have to do is deny Jesus and pledge allegiance to the gods of Rome, and I'll stop ripping your breasts off. All you have to do is just burn incense to the gods, and she won't do it. Blandina, this was in France. And do you remember the city name? Lyon, France. And this is one of the most gruesome tortures. They took days. Blandina was like a mother for all the others that died. And she kept encouraging them not to cave in. They said that they put her on a post, and the men tortured her all day until they were exhausted. And she still said, I am a Christian. I have done no wrong. I will never deny my Lord. And all the others looked to her for an example. And then they finally put her and let a bull get her. And they also, for the others, put iron chairs, and they put fires under the iron chairs until they were red hot, and then they roasted them in those chairs. And this happened in Lyon, France. And it was the Diocese of St. Irenaeus, one of my favorites. They killed the bishop. St. Irenaeus came back and accepted his position, even knowing this could happen to him. Perpetua and Felicity. Throwing a bishop out the window. Oh, they're not going to let us go all the way around. Boiling a woman in oil. They blocked it all off. That's too bad. Anyway, so that it just continues all the way around. Can you imagine when Mel Gibson's movie came out, people said, oh, it's so gory. Do you think we should take our kids to see it? Well, kids saw this kind of thing when they're young. And this church, the families come here for Mass, and this is the #1 wedding church, and people come here for weddings. And usually we can't even get in here because of weddings. But look, this is like graphic images, and kids see it. I think kids should understand what their others went through. I mean, our kids knew right from the beginning. I was not shy to talk to our kids about things. And our kids are devout Catholics now, but it was partly because I never shied back from sharing things with them. But it goes all the way back around, and maybe later, I don't know if we can get access to it, but it just continues on. These are the saints that, had they not been willing to die for Jesus, you and I would not be here today, because Christianity would have died away. But instead, they were courageous. They went into the arenas. And this is what Paul says. I think he wrote Hebrews. He said, when you're in the arenas, there's a great cloud of witnesses. So run the race. What's he talking about? I think he's talking about all these people there in the stands. There's a whole cloud of witnesses in heaven, the communion of saints, and they're all saying, go, go, don't back down. You're going to have problems, torture, whatever it is. Don't ever look. We already did it, and we won the crown of life. So all of you, run the race. Don't let anything get in your way, because The pleasures of sin for a season are not worth the eternal glory you're going to get if you stay faithful to Christ. And that's why I love this church.
Hallelujah.
So we'll go ahead.